Hi, everybody. I'm really excited about our interview today because I have Dr. Heather Brown, someone I really, really adore. And she's a relationship expert who has worked with thousands of individuals and couples in psychotherapy. She's the author of the award winning book, Speaking with the Heart, Transforming Your Relationship with Passion and Connection. She's a TEDx and keynote speaker. She's published in hundreds of journals, has an active TikTok channel, and has been featured on ABC 7 News and has published in the Toronto Sun, Thriving Family Magazine, Light and Life, Brains, Scary Mommy, and Psychology Today. Thank you for being here with me. I'm really excited to talk with you.
Well, since you're one of my favorite people, I was delighted to be asked. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I know that a lot of times when you do your work, you're working with couples, but I really think that anything we do with communication, if it's working with a partnership, it's also going to work with kids. And I'd love to have that dialogue about how we can improve conversation and communication with our children. So, one of the things you talk about in your book is the five love languages. And could you talk a little bit more to those and how those can affect your relationship with your child?
I'd love to. And it's something that a lot of people don't utilize with their children, which I think is a missed opportunity. So, Gary Chapman is the author of the love languages. And for those who don't know, there's five. There's acts of service, there's gifts, there's physical touch, there's encouraging words, and there's special moments. And from the nature of children, they pretty much like them all. And they tend to get a lot of those from their parents. But sometimes there's a place that a child needs more than others. And encouraging words is one, and physical touch is another one that sometimes children need a little bit more. If you listen to your children and listen to the words that they say, they'll give you little clues. They say, when you show up on time, it's really important to me, or you being proud of me is really important to me. So speak with them about them, and they're going to say they like them all, but ask them, is there one that kind of touches your heart more, or is one that you want a little bit more of? Now, this is something to know just about life transitions. As they go through different stages of their life, things will happen. And during that time, it might shift for what they need. If they're in a situation where kids are bullying at school, they're probably going to need a lot more words of affirmation. If finances are really tight, you're not able to do anything fun, you guys might need to be a little creative on special moments. So what's missing in their environment, oftentimes they will then desire more. And as they go through different situations, they'll change. So ask them, and they will keep letting you know what they like the most. Sometimes parents will say, this is the way I am, and this is just what it is, and I'm not comfortable with that. But think about it. If it's the best way for your child to feel most loved, it's important to stretch yourself to try to see if you can start to incorporate that as part of what you offer.
Okay, so maybe you can go through some of them and just give little examples of ways that the parent can utilize each of these love languages to support their child.
Oh, sure. So physical touch, offering a hug, scratching their back when you're driving in the car, giving them a high five, things like that, a kiss on the cheek, of course. Gifts, that could be showing up at school with their favorite drink. It might be putting a little chocolate in their lunch. Acts of service would be helping them with a project, sitting down with them while they're working on their castle that they have to build, and gluing on the little stones along with them, but doing something for painting their room while they're away at school, so when they come home it looks beautiful. Words of encouragement, like, I think you're going to do great, I'm so proud of you, I hope you're really delighted with how you did that, I think you're amazing. All things like that. In special moments, taking a situation that's just a normal situation and making it a little bit more fun. We did silly straws We'd drink with silly straws. I would cut food into hearts and flowers and teddy bears. And so just taking a normal moment, bring out bubbles, bring out music, say we got to stop everything and dance for a moment and celebrate. Just give little fun things where it makes a normal situation, a normal day a little bit more enjoyable.
So if we have a teenager or an older kid, they're going to be pretty aware of what makes them feel good. But a little child maybe isn't so self-reflective that way. So if you don't have that ability to get the language from the child or that ability yet of self-reflection, in what would you observe as a parent that would guide you to what really makes a kid feel great?
I'd try them all. I would just give myself a little experiment one day and say, we're going to try all five, and we're going to see which one lights them up. Where do they smile the most? Where do they run over and hug me? Where are they talking about it? And you'll see some have a much bigger impact than others. And whatever that area is just gives you a lot of insights into your child of how currently they receive love the deepest. But look for how they respond, because you'll know. If you give them a teddy bear and they say thanks, it's not so much if they're hugging it and want to know if they can take it to school and can they sleep with it and can they show grandma. You just got to win.
Okay, that's great. Great advice. I'd like to also look, and you talk a lot about conscious communication and about thinking before you speak. So can you speak into that, and what would you advise parents to do, and how can they gain some skill in this, and what effect does that have?
I think one of the most important things with this is to know what you want the outcome of the conversation to be.
Okay.
And I think sometimes we're really bad at this with our children. We're certainly bad at this with our partners. But if I know that I need to help you get your homework done, me saying, you always do this, what's wrong with you, isn't the best way to start. So you want to think about what is the outcome of the situation, of the conversation that you're desiring. And then what's the best way to try to cultivate that for happening. So I might start with, hey, I know you're a little slow getting going on the homework. And I know there's a lot for us to do tonight in that. Like, what can I do to help you move into that space right now? Or how can we set this up so you dive in for a half an hour and, then we do something fun following. You want to work with whomever you're speaking with instead of against. And most of us go into the problem, the challenge, instead of trying to find the solution, which is a completely different energy, and it feels different because you don't feel like you're on the same team.
So you're really speaking to the outcome.
Yes. Yes.
That's what I'm hearing you say. We're speaking to an outcome.
To the outcome, to the solution, to the movement, to the shift, to what can have energy and power, instead of focusing on what's going wrong right now, what isn't working, the bad behavior, the problem that you're having. It's all there. It's all there. But a problem and a solution feel different. And for children, because they are so emotionally connected, a lot more so than we are, because they haven't learned to disconnect from that, they feel it more. And so when they see that you're trying to maneuver them, if they feel it with support, they're going to be a little bit more apt to go with you. If they, especially with teenagers, if they feel you're belittling them, putting them down, telling them anything negative, they're just going to shut you out and not listen.
I also find an interesting thing, like I used to work with really little ones, and I'd go in sometimes and I was there supporting a kid who had a learning disability. And I would find often the teachers go, act nice. What is that? The kid doesn't know what that is. But if the teacher then shifts it and says, oh, we want to share our toys, and then models what that looks like, that's really different than nice. Or giving a child a choice. Do you want to share the toy? Ask. And maybe the kid says no. And then to say, oh, he said no. So what are you going to look for now? What are you going to play with? And that's really different than that whole kind of nice. And I think that they're related, what I'm talking about, and what you're talking about. It's that we want really clear expectations and communication of where we're going to go.
I
And
agree.
how, yeah,
And I think there's another layer that you've brought up, which is I think a fascinating one, which is act nice in some way to me says to me that I am doing something I shouldn't be doing.
right,
And because it's about me, I'm going to feel like you're putting me down. If you
right,
say, "Hey, I think Yael would really like to play with the silly string. Will you give her an opportunity to?" I don't feel that at all.
right.
And that's a really important distinction between the two. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. And I see it a place that constantly this is a weakness in communication with small children. And I think actually even older children. Could you speak to that? Like when we're dealing with teenagers, we can have a lot of rebellion. And on one level, it's their job right now to be individuating and finding out who they are. But at the same time, we want to keep them safe. And we want to have really strong boundaries and expectations about behavior. Maybe could you speak a little bit to how what language is most powerful in that kind of situation with a kid?
When they're arguing with you about a boundary that you're placing or when you're trying to instill one.
Either you could talk to both situations because I think that comes up a lot with older kids, and it can come up with a younger kid who's just a defiant kid. Some
So,
kids have a more of a nature that they don't want to be told what to do. So some parents say, "Oh, they're defiant." It could be that they're just leaders and they don't really they like to kind of lead the way. But I I think you understand what I'm asking, no?
yeah, so I think there's a place to say, I think I have some clarity of what it is that you're wanting to do. And there's some aspects about that I'm completely fine with. I'm completely fine with you want to go to the party. I'm completely fine with it's at, Susie's house, the times you want to pick up and da, 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 da. What I'm having difficulty with is that you haven't shared if there's going to be any parents there. So it's not that I'm trying to 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 create a challenge or a problem, but I just need to make certain that there's an adult present. The more you can help your teen in the place of, I really want to get to yes, but there's some things that we got to figure out here to be able to ascertain how we get there. I remember when my son was a senior and he didn't think that there was going to be pot or alcohol, but he wasn't completely sure. And the parents were going to be there. And so I told him, I get it, that could happen. Big promise to mom. And I'll say yes. If alcohol or drugs are there, I want you to give me a call and we'll talk about it. Now, what was interesting is the day before the party, he was invited over to a friend's house and he went, and it ended up being 5 girls, the parents not home, and I get this muffled phone call from the bathroom. And he's like, "Mom, you need to come get me." I'm like, "What's going on, honey?" He's like, "I'm in a house with 5 teenage girls. There's no parents. I don't think this is a good idea." And I told him, "I am so proud of you. Thank you. Yeah, I'm coming right now." That to me spoke volumes. And so when it came time for the party, I said, "Dude, I know you're going to be honest with me. I know you're going to take care of yourself. If you find you're in a situation that's a little sticky, you know, call me and I'll pick you up a couple of blocks away so no one knows and we'll figure this out." And that allowed my son to be much more honest with me. I didn't say there aren't going to be things that are going on that I'm going to have a little bit of a hard time with. I did say we got to figure out how do we do this together. Now, that doesn't mean they were always 100% honest. I'm sure they probably weren't sometimes, but I think for the most part, both of my kids really were. So I used to say, "Help me get to yes," or let's talk about all the places we totally agree. There's one other thing too. When your child is just insistent, ask them why it's so important to them.
Oh, I love that idea. Yeah. What's so strong?
There's a reason. It doesn't mean you're going to go to yes, but there's something you need to know because it doesn't bring you clarity. It was finals week. My daughter wanted to go to a party. I'm like, it's finals week. Why would they even have a party? She's like, Mom, I have to go, I have to go, I have to go, I have to go. I'm like, no. And then I said, why is this so important? And she said, it's the last night that one of our kids from school is going to be there. They're leaving to go back home. They're an international student. And I'm like, oh, you have to show up. So it
Right.
veered what would have normally been my protocol. But I needed that piece of information to then respect why this was so important.
I love that. I think it's a really important thing because also then what happens is it shifts the relationship from kind of confrontational to collaborative.
Yes.
By asking those questions, you're showing that you actually value what's important to your kid, that you actually really understand where they are and what's important to them.
And that's the key. Even if you can't come through, it gives you a place to say, oh my gosh, oh, I can see why this is so important. And I'm so sorry that grandma is flying in that day and we've promised to meet her up in Northern California. I'm so sorry that the same day. Is there a way we can do something other than what, you are wanting to do so you get a little bit of that? Could we Zoom? Or,
Right.
can we do something another day with this person? It helps you be a little bit more creative, um, and just understanding for your child's disappointment.
I think that's an important thing to speak to also is, well, maybe we can't have it exactly in the form you're thinking, but we can give you enough of the substance and we need to get creative.
Yeah. It gets fun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And what about the same thing with a little one? Sometimes little ones are really stubborn.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's finding out once again why it's so important. There's going to probably be a little bit more education there. I get you want chocolate chip cookies all the time. They are so yummy. You're going to have to give a little education about why that can't be. But then there's some places to say, okay, so let's think about it. So since you get to have one chocolate chip cookie today, that's great. That's your dessert. Like, where are the options that could it be? Could it be before you've had any dinner? Would that be a good option? Sounds good, huh? Probably not, because you're probably not going to be hungry. Would it be
Right.
good after you've brushed your teeth? No, because that would taste yucky. How about in the bathtub? No, it's going to get wet. So you can be kind of playful and silly and goofy with it, and then say, I was thinking after dinner. And I'm even okay with not making your plate quite as full of everything if you want to make certain you've got room for the cookie. How about we put
I think
it?
there's always room for a cookie.
I think for most of us there is.
Yes, excuse me. I mean, I very rarely meet children who are, I don't want a cookie. Oh, you do
No,
occasionally,
no.
But it's kind of a funny thing, right? And maybe, while we're at it, there are children who clinically are oppositional defiant. There is a diagnosis. So, how would you then work with someone like that where it's actually there's a biological underpinning to some of this, most likely? So,
Well,
can you
and
speak to?
that's not a specialty of mine. I don't work
Okay.
with oppositional defiance, so I wouldn't be the best person to come to for
Mm,
that. Um, but the parts that I do know, you're going to have to go down to why it is that you have put in the rules or the behaviors that you have, and what it is that you need your child to agree to be able to have this interaction be productive and helpful, and then some conversations about it. But that would be something I'd probably talk to a specialist about because that's a very different dynamic.
Fair enough. Thank you. And thank you for that insight and letting people know that they maybe need to go to somebody else for some of this. Um, can you talk a little bit more about the idea? And you a little bit touched on this already with the little kids, but there's the idea you have in the book about the idea authority versus fun. You know, and I'd love to hear more about that as a parent. And
Well, I think childhood can be magical, and I don't think, except for like an oppositional defiant, couple other places with there where there might be some personality disorders, I think most children really do want to align and do like structure, but there's a lot of creativity that you can do to make it just more enjoyable. What a lot of parents will say is just do it because I'm mom and I'm telling you to do it. And I just don't think that personally is an effective response. Just because I'm mom doesn't mean necessarily that it's the greatest decision in the world. The bigger problem is I don't then as your child when I grow up know what to do with that. And so there's certain things to talk about with that. There's some things we do have to make certain get done because I am the person who's responsible for you right now. But I also want it to be enjoyable. And so working together, we can find ways that it will be more so. You can just say no, but then we're stuck here. And then we're not going to be doing anything enjoyable beyond this. How about we find some way to do this together where we can do it really quickly and then move on to something that's enjoyable? Or try to be a little bit creative with them and a little bit playful with it. This is my hat and it's the way it is and you just have to accept it doesn't sit well with most people because you don't feel like your feelings are important. And so once again, it doesn't necessarily mean the parent's going to say yes, but I'd say, okay, well, like if you could be the parent and you could do it any way that you would want to, like, would you let your child eat chocolate chip cookies all the time? Wouldn't you be worried about their stomach or their skin or their teeth or diabetes? And they're going to probably say, well, yeah, but more than you. And that might be something that you do. Or you might say, you know what, then let's find some cookies that are kind of healthy and then we can have more. But this one might not be the healthiest choice.
I'm also thinking in listening to you, there was something you said about having to do something. And I read this very interesting little thing. There's a book called The Creative Act by Rick Rubin. And it's going to seem like I'm going off to the side, but I'm not. So he talks about this idea that he works a lot with musicians and they can have writer's block. And so when he has these people as a writer's block, one of the things he'll do is say, just write one sentence a day. Mm-hmm. Or write for 1 minute a day. But what starts to happen is, he said, after a week or two, all of a sudden that, because they're committing to it, everything opens up. And so I was thinking about, as you were speaking, I was thinking about how do we apply this with authority? Because if you have a kid who hates doing homework, but we just say, well, we're going to sit down for 5 minutes to start, and we just get the kid used to it, that, after a while that becomes not as much of a restriction. It becomes, oh, if I do this, I'm going to have some freedom after, and I'm going to have the relief that it's done, right? So it seems to me like in listening to you that part of what we can do with our authority is by kind of giving guidance, we can actually teach someone how they can kind of hit a level of freedom because we're exercising that boundary and that authority.
And you can model it.
Yeah.
You can model it. Say, you know what, I'll sit with you. I'll sit with you and I'll help you make the cue cards for 5 minutes. Or point out, you know what, I really don't like doing the dishes. And I got to do them because we ate. So how about this? How about you pound your homework for 5 minutes? I'll pound our dishes. We'll check in on each other and see how we're doing. Let's see who can get finished first and best. Maybe it turns into a little bit of a competition. Maybe it turns into a little bit of a race. I homeschooled my kids. And when were in the younger grades, I'd say to them on a day where I knew we didn't have too much to do, I'd say, if we can get done by 1 with everything done well, we can go to the beach. If we get done by 3, we can go to the park. If we're done by 4, we can play in the backyard. We're going to do something fun after school. We went to the beach a lot. But it was important that we did the schoolwork first because otherwise there's no way it would have been done. And that is something for older children that they understand. I get that you just want to watch a movie and relax. The challenge that I have with that is if you're exhausted, if you're tired, if there's an emergency that comes up tonight, you won't have done the homework. So let's flip it. Let's get the homework done so we know you're okay for tomorrow. And then of course let's watch a movie. And I'll tell the family that you get first pick. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really beautiful what you're saying. I think there's a lot of grace in what you're saying.
I think that's such an important part of being human. And it definitely is a huge part of the way that I live my life and work with clients. So I agree. I'm glad it comes through, but I agree. And I think that is very honoring. And I think that is also kind and compassionate. And I think we respond better when that is there. I know people say you have to be forceful, you have to be strong, you have to be direct. And there definitely are times for that. But I also feel that sometimes when things are done with force, it's not the best way. I read a book that was called Shepherding Your Child's Heart. And it said, I do want the child who doesn't eat the cookie. But I want the child who doesn't eat the cookie when I'm not even in the room. Because they have chosen to follow something that has been laid down. And I thought, that's what I want too. I don't want the child who just tells me what I want to hear when they're in my presence. I don't want a sneaky child. And I think that's something we have to look at. Are we helping create sneaky children? Or are we helping children really decide for themselves, is this a good choice that I am going to make in my life and why?
There's something you also said about force. And what came up for me was this idea. I remember a while ago I was talking with someone and they were, what do you want in this particular event? And then they said, be really clear what the outcome you want, because knowing the outcome is actually going to help you set a boundary that ultimately is freeing. And I started to realize something with children and this idea of force, that sometimes what it is when I'm clear with my boundary, it actually shifts the power dynamic. Because I don't have to force you so much. I'm just, here's my hard no. But it's not about I'm battling your will. It's just I know where my limit is. And I think that this somehow relates to the idea of what you were talking about, just about force and authority.
And I think that's beautiful too, because that then gives the person who is authority the role to say, I'm not okay with this. We got a ton of options here. But like you saying, F you, mom, that's a hard no for me. I'm not going to say that to you. And so I'm not staying in this conversation. Yeah, it gives the child their own power back. There was one time, my husband spanked a couple of times. And there was one time where my daughter was making a choice that if he chose to could result in a spanking. And I remember it was so hard not to laugh. He said to her, do you want a spanking? And she was 5. And she said, no, I don't want a spanking. And then she did whatever it was that he had told her would result in a spanking. And he said, you have chosen this now. And she said, I didn't choose it. I don't want a spanking. You did. And I thought, oh my gosh, she's sharp. There was the place to recognize that he had set, and she did cross that. And so as a result, there was a spanking there. But it showed me there was more conversation to have before that.
Right.
Like, why are you fighting me on this? Like, what is that about? Why is this not okay for me to set this limit? There's something there that's important to really explore to find out why your child is so resistant to it. And it might be simple, it might be huge. But sometimes the resistance that you're finding, there's a way to once again work with it. If you're kicking my leg across the table and I keep asking you to stop because it hurts and you don't, I have the choice to move my chair back where you can't. And then I'm not left hoping you will care or listen or not fidget. Now, when it's intentional, then you're in the middle of a power struggle, and that would be important to talk about. And I would try to find ways where your child can be empowered, where they do get to choose. And then I would also be very clear on where are some of those places that for you, you're not opening up that possibility.
You're saying that, and I'm having a memory of being really little, maybe 6 or something. And really, one day, just being such a pill with my older sister, really just at her, bugging her, bugging her, bugging her. And my father kept going, stop, stop, stop. And I couldn't. And he finally was, I'm going to spank you if you don't stop. But I was just, I remember getting spanked, but I realized that what it was I was kind of angry. She's older. She gets to do what she wants. I don't have a lot of choice here.
And that would be important to talk about.
But I realized no one said, well, what's going on? Because it wasn't my typical behavior as a kid. It just wasn't really who I was as a kid. But I really have a memory of it. I could not control myself.
I think that was a huge clue that Yael is acting in a way she doesn't normally act. Something's different for her here. What is this? And it might be hard to help you find it in the moment. I'm not sure. Or you might have. You might have been able to say, like, I don't like that I have no say.
Yeah. Maybe I was bored and I needed to be doing something else and no one was me any alternatives because I was little. But it was sort of not my typical behavior. And I'm loving what you're saying because I think that that's something we don't do when a kid is, excuse me, having a hard time. We don't go, let's stop. What's going on here?
Yeah. Well, they want attention. And as we all know, if you don't get positive, oftentimes you go for negative. So they do want attention. And there are ways to work with that. My daughter, when she was super young, used to have meltdowns and she was just hysterically sob and wail onto the floor. We have a small house. And so she was in the middle of the mainway. And so I told her, like, love, it sounds like you just need to have a really good cry. I don't want you to get stepped on. So I'm going to lay you out on your bed and you have a good cry and you scream and you do whatever you need to do. And when you know you want some love, when you want some comfort, will you come get me? Because I want to give you that when you want that. I know you don't right now. Right now you want to scream. And so she'd come out in 2 minutes, come hug, of course. But there was a way for me to acknowledge this behavior that she was doing, but yet I still didn't want her to get kicked or stepped on or people to fall over her. Plus, it was irritating for everybody else to have to listen to that. In her room, it was further away.
I think it's great, but I love how you approached it with so much compassion instead of anger. Because I think a lot of times with parents can get frustrated, they can get angry. And that's another thing that I think often can happen, especially for moms. Maybe dads too, but I see this with moms. Like, I think sometimes we have an agenda. X, Y, and Z have to happen. I need to change the baby and I have to make dinner and I have to get everyone then. And then there's a bath and then someone's having a meltdown and you're like, no, I have to get this done. And we don't know how to step out of this kind of, well, I need to do something and just get present. I love what you said because I think it's really speaking to how can I keep stopping and getting present?
And I think I think in the world, when we recognize that and give the attention there in that moment, I think it isn't problematic as long.
Right.
I do, it sounds like the opposite, but it's a parallel behavior for couples. When they're in a communication and one person's starting to get overwhelmed, one person's starting to get angry, I say, we're going to take a quick little pause. Want you both to walk around for, a minute or two. Take some deep breaths. and then we're going to come back and do this again. And by not pushing further into where they are, but creating a little bit of space, definitely emotional and energetic release, which is so key to whatever is going on for anyone at any time, then you can come back to it a little bit differently. So finding that way to work with pacing, be it a child, be it a partner, is so important. So important.
And also to stop it before it escalates.
Yes.
Because it can really escalate, and sometimes it can go from 0 to 100 really fast, like knocking them out.
Yes. That can change. That very, very quick exacerbation can change the more you work with stopping and calming down a little bit, lessening the energy, and then coming back, because you will actually start to see that that works better. And so you will start to internally regulate that a little bit, but sometimes it takes a little while for that to kick in. Yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes you're the person who is internally regulated and you're trying to regulate it, and the other person's so dysregulated they can't accept you putting a stop on it. It actually can exacerbate it. What do you mean you're stopping me?
Well, that was my daughter. I wasn't going to tell her to not cry, to not scream. There was no way. But I could move her from where she was. You can scream and yell if you and I are having a conversation, but I will step out of the room. And that's a big piece in trying to help children, teens, adults, partners to realize there's a place where I need to respect you, but I also need to respect myself. And when I'm in a situation that feels like I am being disrespected, it's a problem with the parent. If the parent is being disrespectful to the child, we've got a challenge there. And it would depend upon the individual situation of how that's going to be handled. But in most situations, there's the place of this no longer is a space that I can stay in and benefit you. So I need to help myself get to a place where I can once again be willing to listen to you. I used to give myself timeouts. I called them mommy timeouts. Didn't have them very often, but every once in a while. And my son was so funny. I'd come back and he'd say, "What was it that you wanted to say before you took the time out?" I'm like, "I'm not going there." But there were some times where I needed to. I was getting too frustrated and I knew it. And I'd say, "I'm going to be back in 1 minute. Just going to go into the other room where I can still see you." Yeah.
These are really empowering, suggestions that you're making, because a lot of people just don't know to communicate this way. And I think it really can completely change the quality of how we're relating with our children when we start to communicate in this way.
They need to know they're important. They need to know their feelings are important. They need to know their wishes are important. It just doesn't always mean we're going to act upon them.
Right. Yeah, it's really, really important. I do want to talk about something else that's in the book, and I think it's really important. And I think we've touched about it without being explicit, but I'd like to get a little more into it, because you talk a lot about the idea of safety and fear versus trust. And I'd love to hear more of what you have to say about that and how that affects communication and connection.
Oh, hugely. So whatever dynamic we have been raised in, some aspects of it are going to feel safe, are going to feel comforting, are going to feel supportive, are going to feel loving, and some places not so much. And it's very important, whomever you're trying to connect with, when you're having a conversation that's a difficult one, to find out where are the places that they shut down, or where are the places they act out, where are the places that they've got a belief that messes them up a little bit in their head, so that you know. And then that way, when you have to have a conversation, you can say, like, I know this is an area that's been tough. Talking about friends has been an area that's sensitive. And I want to be really gentle here. and there's a conversation that I need to have with you about it. So, what is it that you need to know from me to know that I want to talk with you about this? And I think it might be a little difficult. So,
Mhm.
do you need to know I love you? Do you need to know that we'll walk through this slowly and maybe not resolve it today? And find out how they can stay a little bit more present. Sometimes it's physical touch. Sometimes it's saying, you are more important to me than this conversation.
Excuse me.
I need you to know that you're more important in this conversation. And we're going to figure this out. Um, if you don't know how the other person needs to keep themselves safe, or if the other person hasn't figured that out, it's a little bit more precarious.
Hmm.
And so I will ask people, like, straight up, what causes you to feel unsafe when you were together?
Mm.
And what can we do to lessen that right now in this room? And that can be with a child too. When mommy raises her voice, I feel scared. Oh, okay. Thank you for letting me know. What makes you feel scared about that? Well, I heard that sometimes people hit, or my whole body starts to shake, or I think she's angry with me. And then there would be a conversation to have with mom, like, oh, okay, mom. So, what have you heard from what your child has said? How can we help them feel safer with this? Sweetheart, I know I sometimes raise my voice. I have a bad habit of that. And I think you're going to help me lessen that. And I am absolutely going to try. But could we come up with like a gesture that you make when you start to get scared?
Hmm.
And then when I see the gesture, I'm going to know you're asking me to take a little break, calm myself down a little bit, and come back because you're feeling overwhelmed. A gesture can work really well. Sometimes the words are hard to say, especially for the child to the parent when they're scared. So, you know, I wouldn't have it be the third finger.
Yeah.
Um, but, do something. Or if you do come up with a word that's a silly word, like blunder or something. I had one couple that would do um, tofu hot dog, and that made them laugh, which was great because then they'd start laughing instead of being upset with each other. But it's really important to listen to where those places that the person, instead of, that makes no sense, I'm not yelling at you, like you shouldn't have a problem with this. Maybe that's your viewpoint, but why should anyone be yelled at? And so, what we often do when we feel we're being criticized is we'll put the responsibility back on the other instead of listening to how it impacts them. And I can say they're off and they're wrong. I can say that. Nobody else thinks this. You're the only person who does. But this person does. And so, if I'm not showing that I'm caring that they're having this response, now I think it's okay to say, wow, I haven't had someone say that before. Thank you for letting me know. But I am really not aware that you have this experience with me. So I'm going to try to be able to be a little softer or lower my voice for you.
It's an interesting thing you bring up because I had that recently. I had a certain conflict of expectations with someone. And I expressed a way I wasn't happy, and all they came back with it was the ways I needed to fix myself. And I was like
How'd
grateful.
that feel?
Well, I actually, for me, it was a moment of really great empowerment because I realized I could see that that's how they were responding. And internally, I just said, I'm just telling you my experience because I actually think if I tell you something that's a little negative, there might be room for something to improve. But if it wasn't landing and you're getting defensive and having to come back and correct me, I was so grateful that I could see that they weren't able to listen, that they really couldn't take it in and be open about it. They just felt so defended and defensive. And um, it was just kind of interesting. It sort of felt sad because I think there's always an opportunity in a conflict to have actually much greater understanding.
I agree.
And if the person said, well, this is what I'm hearing you're upset about, is that correct? And then maybe said, well, this is my point of view, I would have felt heard. I really just was clear this person didn't hear me at all. But I'm grateful I'm at a point in my life now I can just go, wow, they didn't hear me.
Yeah.
Because maybe at another point in my life I would have just gotten angry, or it was important for me to be right. And that really wasn't what I was experiencing. And I think that's another thing that happens is sometimes we have conflict and we want to be right. We get older, what we really want to be more is curious.
Curiosity is one of the best things to bring to relationship and conversation. And I think especially when, like you, working with children, and especially working with special needs children, because the sensory is different.
Right.
And so to me, what feels like gentle touch to a child who is highly sensitive, it might absolutely not. And if you think about it big picture, when someone's telling you that they have difficulty with something or they don't appreciate something, they're asking you to care about their situation more. And what I would tell my family is, you don't have to do it. You certainly don't. I'm just letting you know I have a hard time with this. It is easier for me to love you when you're not screaming in my face.
Yeah.
It's harder for me to, and I don't want to be around you. So if you want me to be around, I'm just letting you know it's going to happen more so if you care about how this impacts me as well. But there's gold in that conversation. Like, I want to be able to love you well. And what you're asking of me, I look at it as, is a way to stretch me. You're asking me on some level to be more respectful, more attentive, more aware, more giving than I have been. It's hard for me to say that's a bad thing for me to try to do. I might not want to.
Right.
But it's hard for me to say learning to be more mindful, more aware, more attentive, more patient, more compassionate isn't also in my better good. When my kids would come to me with a criticism, I'd say, oh, awesome, awesome. Mom's going to be even better shortly. They would laugh. I'd say, okay, I'm ready. But I would take a moment to know, like, this might be hard. And I would tell them, wow, ooch, ooch, ooch. Okay, challenge accepted. And then we would do it the opposite way too. It's lovely.
Yeah, I think it's really important. Listen, we're coming to the end of the interview, and I'm so appreciative of the time and the depth and of your wisdom and the generosity. Is there anything else you'd like to share that you feel is important that maybe we haven't covered that you think might be important for parents to know?
This one will probably sound a little bit strange, but for some of the listeners, they'll get it. You are where you are to be to grow you in the ways that you are to grow. It doesn't mean you're going to always enjoy it. And the places that are the hardest are oftentimes the hardest to really appreciate. But there's something for us to learn there about ourselves. And when you do have a child that is a more challenging child, it is a tougher experience. But there also is so much more to learn about loving than there is for a child who's incredibly compliant and easy. So there's the place of remembering that and honoring that. This is a tough relationship. I need to remember that. I don't enjoy some of our interactions because they're challenging, but that doesn't mean I don't enjoy my child. This is one thing that's so important. Separate the behavior from the child. I never said good boy, bad boy. It was good choice, bad choice. Because we as a human being are not all good or all bad. And we do have choices. And I think it's very important to separate those. And I think most parents don't. And it really hurts the children's esteem.
It's interesting that you're saying that because when I do parent coaching, I often say we don't want to say good boy, bad boy. And one of the things I remember reading from old time, over 50 years ago, Chaim Ganat, where he talks about congruent therapy, we praise the skill.
Yes.
It's not good or bad. Wow, you got all your homework done today by yourself. We speak to the competency. And I do love the idea of good choice, bad choice, because it's not about you. It's just we need to hone that ability to discriminate and make good decisions.
It also lets you wrestle a little bit with that trickiness of like, why would you choose that?
Right.
Which is important to uncover because we all have places where we do not act upon what is best.
Oh,
Why?
yeah.
Why? What is that about? How can we help ourselves there? Yeah.
And how many times have we all gone, oh, I even heard an inner voice say not to do it and I did it.
Yeah.
We've all heard that. And I think one of the beauties of getting a little older is we are more apt to listen to that inner voice and just go, oh, if I'm hearing it, I'm going to go with it. But it takes a lot of making mistakes until we listen to that voice. It does. So please, I'm so grateful. It was so juicy. I'd love to even have you come back again and really talk with you because it's so much fun to talk to you. Please tell everyone how they can reach you and, let's just get some more information out there about if anyone wants to reach you or see you on social media.
So the easiest place is to go to my website, which is drheatherbrown.com. So it's www.drheatherbrown.com. That's like the hub of me. So it has my TEDx up there if you want to watch it. It has some of the news shows I've been on, lots of podcasts. It has my link to my book. It has how I work with people, a newsletter, lots of things. So that's the easiest place. It also has all my social media links connected. So if you just go to my website, you'll find it. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Heather. It's just been such a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Blessings.
Same to you.